All right. Looks like we already have lots of members joining us. It's exciting.
It's always a fun topic. That's why.
Yeah, well, I think that it's a great topic and lots of our members is super useful for them, especially right now because everybody's getting ready to PCS.
Exactly.
And so it's perfect timing. I know we are PCSing this summer.
Where are you guys headed to?
We're headed to Egypt, to Cairo, Egypt, actually.
Oh, wow.
Sounds amazing.
It will be cool. My husband is a Arabic speaker, and so we're going back to the Middle East. So.
Awesome. Did you do training out of Monterey?
Yeah, so we were in Monterey from 2016 to 2019, and then we moved to Abu Dhabi, and then we were there for 3 years, and we're in San Antonio now at the Defense Language Institute that's here, and then now we're going back.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love it. It's a little wild. We have so many. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited you're here. I think we can begin. Let me just close a couple windows here. We are super excited to welcome Jason Rivera and his wife, Stephanie. Stephanie is actually the property manager. And Jason, you are a real estate agent, correct?
Correct.
And one of our vetted ADPI agents in San Diego. And I'm super excited that they're here today because this is a topic that actually I hold near and dear because we have been through a few property managers and experiences without property managers that led to thousands of dollars worth of damage in one of our rental homes. And then we've also had to fire a property manager, which we didn't really know the process of doing that or if we could do that. And so Stephanie is going to talk today about how we hire a property manager, finding the one that's right for you because they may be a great property manager, but they might not be the fit for you as a homeowner. So it's really important to know that what you're looking for in a property manager. So I will turn the time over to the Riveras.
All right. Let's bring this up.
Well, thank you for having us. We're excited to be here today and share our knowledge and what we've learned through the process. So I'm Stephanie Rivera. I'm the broker of Five Peaks Property Management and co-owner of Legacy Real Estate with Jason. So we do real estate sales and property management under our two different companies. And Jason, as you mentioned, is the ADPI agent here.
And outside of an agent, I'm prior Navy, subservice, just under 10 years. Been part of ADPI since essentially conception. And yeah, excited to get started because I know this is always a kind of a controversial topic where it's either hardcore, you should always have an agent or a property manager, or it's the opposite where it's like, no, only ever self-manage. And I think it really kind of starts from day one to kind of gear you as to making this a successful journey into becoming a landlord and having a successful passive income on your rental. So today we're going to talk about, as Beth already mentioned, why to hire a good or a great PM, the qualities to look for, understanding the services offered, fee structure, tenant screening, maintenance and repairs, and then legal. And then we'll just kind of open it up to Q&A. I believe we can do that. So why should you hire one? Going back to what I just said, it's primarily because this is what's going to make or break your property, right? Like people that want to get into becoming landlords, what stops them is the idea of managing tenants. They think it's a headache. Those who have become landlords and had bad experiences, a lot of times it's because they've had bad tenants or they had bad experiences with property managers, and both of those kind of coincided with one another. I'll let you.
Yeah. So I want to actually backtrack on the prior screen. It talked about the property managers. It's not just having someone manage the communication, but it's the day-to-day operation. It's maintenance requests, tenant inquiries, understanding the local and state housing laws and ordinances and the changes that are happening. Here in San Diego, we have city-specific laws, and we have county and state laws as well. There's ordinances that came through because of the flooding that happened here. So someone who can keep up to speed with those. And also someone who is able to view that property and help you over time increase the profitability of your property. So understanding the changes in rent, if rent is going up or if we're seeing a decrease in rent, the trends are happening, negotiating renewals on the property, things along those lines. So all of those factors, in a nutshell, is why it's so important to have a strong property manager supporting you and helping you with your investment. Really, property management comes down to communication. So a property manager's job is they're fiduciaries to the owner, and their communication lines between the owner and the tenant. So, you want a happy tenant who's communicating, letting us know about any maintenance items, anything that they need, but also someone who will stay in that home as, ideally as long as they can. Turnover can be expensive. So being able to keep up with renewals and market rent, but also being able to maintain that property and have somebody there who's a good, happy tenant in the long term. So that communication between the parties is so important for the property manager. Again, understanding that local rental market. So you hear trends of what's happening, but as in any type of real estate is local specific. You can see one area rent will go up, another area rent will go down. I'll use San Diego as an example. When COVID hit, you saw that home values in downtown actually went down because no one wanted to live in high rises. But if you were in that market, you would have seen that San Diego as a whole, home values were going up. So understanding the small nuances that exist in the community is important.
The micro neighborhoods.
Yep, exactly. Changes that are coming and happening. Knowing all those local laws that we just talked about. So like I said, you've got your state laws, your local jurisdictions, natural hazards and emergencies that can happen that can impact what you can and can't do. And being proactive in dealing with issues. Water is the biggest issue with a property. You want to be able to have that open dialogue with the tenant to address anything that comes their way, but also that ongoing maintenance and care of a home.
So getting started and you start interviewing property managers. I feel like this is something that's kind of overlooked. A lot of times you hear people have either been referred someone or they just went with their real estate agent, and it was kind of like, I only talked to one person. This is something that you need to start early out. Don't wait to 1 week before your PCS. I mean, honestly, this is like, if you're leaving that year, you need to be getting ready that year. Like beginning of the year, all right, we're going to prep our house to rent. And with that being said, we need to look for or interview a property manager. When you start that process, you need to ask about their services. They're not all black and white. Well, the mass majority, yes, they are going to manage your home, is kind of clear cut. Each one is going to do something a little bit different. And those services is what's going to be more tailored for your own person. I know Beth and I, and Steph, we were talking earlier, and she was talking about how she really likes more hands-on. She wants to be involved in the process and picking out, maybe if the dishwasher was to break, she wants to be able to pick out the dishwasher. Where there might be other owners that are like, I don't care. I just want a dishwasher that's $120 or less, or whatever the case may be. And so that's going to vary based on the property manager. Some property manager will be like, yeah, that's awesome. I'll let you pick it out. Just ship it to your house and I'll have the handyman install it. And others are going to be like, wait a minute, we're going to have our own handyman, our own contractor, whoever come out and do it. And it's going to cost this amount. So you need to ask about those services. How do they handle maintenance requests? How do they, well, I have a list here, so I don't jump all over the place, but how do they manage tenant placement and turnover? What do they do for property maintenance and repairs? What is their financial management? Do they provide reports? Is there a portal? What does that look like? Legal compliance. We're going to talk a little bit more into that, so I won't get too detailed in that. Tenant relations, Steph already kind of touched on that. As much as the property manager is working for you and you want them to uphold the property in that, realize that there is another customer, that is that tenant. And keeping the tenant happy ultimately means that you as the owner is getting paid too, right? And ultimately you really want to make it a working relationship. You guys don't have to be best friends, but you want a working relationship so that your house is taken care of. They're in your asset. So hopefully your house is getting taken care of and they're paying you on time. And property inspections. This is a huge area that I think often gets overlooked. Self-managing, you hear about people self-managing, but they've never put eyes on their property for the entire 3 years that they've PCS'd out of the area. Or they hire a property manager who apparently is doing property inspections, but they never have any proof. And I think if you're requesting property inspections, which you should, I would highly recommend like a 6-month property inspection, that there's proof, either photos, some sort of report every 6 months that you're receiving that says, hey, this is the status of your property. Here's what we found is wrong with it. Here's what the tenants have reported. Here's what we're working to get replaced or fixed or whatever. And that way, every 6 months, I get eyes on my property, even though I might be in Japan or Abu Dhabi or wherever.
And then another question is asking their fee structure. So are they charging a flat fee? Is there a percentage that they're charging? Do they offer a military discount? Or do they charge renewal fees, vacancy fees, maintenance fees, maintenance markups, termination fees, inspection fees? So what does their fee structure look like? And understanding all of those, if there are hidden fees involved in that. So definitely asking those questions will be helpful. I'd say the standard throughout the US is somewhere between about an 8% to a 12% of the gross rent is what people tend to pay for property management. And a lot of times people want to go with a lower cost property manager in order to maximize their profits, but many times it doesn't include all the services, such as Jason said, inspections, renewals, the negotiation, the pricing. So just understanding what does that entail.
I was going to say, if you're almost going back, when you're asking about these services, kind of follow that question up is what services cost extra? Is there a renewal fee? Does professional photos cost more? Inspection fees, early termination. Early terminations is big because you get into contract with this property manager and, typically it's going to be a 1-year contract and you realize that, our communication is not working. We're not a good fit. I want to cancel. What does that look like? Some property managers do have some pretty hefty cancellation fees. So that's something that you should be aware of. Realize that you can cancel at any point in time, but also realizing that what is going to happen when I do cancel? What should I expect? And that also goes to say that if you decide to sell your home, some property managers may have written in there that if you sell your home while it's being managed by them, that they have first right of refusal to list your home. So that's just something that you need to be aware of and something that you should ask about if that's something that's kind of on the table for you.
And I know with the early termination, Beth talked about, how do you go about firing a property manager? What I would say first is have a conversation with a property manager. Make sure your expectations are aligned because most often there's just a miss in the communication. And one party may not be aware of what the other party is thinking or feeling. It's a relationship business. So reaching out with an email, a phone call, and just saying, hey, these are items of concern I have or things I'd like to address. How can we work together to remedy these? If they're not something that you're comfortable remedying, it's better to part ways than to continue a painful relationship for anybody. And at the same time, open dialogue is critical. So reach out, ask questions. Again, the property manager may be thinking they're fulfilling what was needed in terms of that relationship with you. And you may be saying, but I need love every single month, just like in any other relationship, or you might be saying that was just too much love. Let's not talk that much. Just letting them know, having a conversation. Usually that will help remedy things. And if not, tracking your communication in email, documenting in real estate and property management, documentation is key. So, being able to say, per our conversation, we talked about these 3 items of issues that we'd like to resolve. Please confirm receipt of this email and how we'll proceed forward to resolve it. Or, per our communication, this is not a win-win relationship. And at this point, we're going to go in a different direction. And we, like to kindly cancel. Obviously, review your contract, know what the terms are in there and what needs to happen. But I can't emphasize enough that communication.
Tenant screening process. This is another big area to review with the property manager is how do they go about screening their tenant? I know some homeowners want to be involved in that process or at least be notified as to what kind of tenant is potentially going to occupy their property. And others are like, I just want a good tenant in there. But asking the property manager, what are their requirements? How do they review the application? How's the application received? Is there a credit check? The standard on the screen here is, credit check, rental history, employment, income verification, background check, all pretty standard, but how do they actually go about that? Do they actually call their references? We find that a lot of people tell us that, hey, like, references were never called. And spending that extra 10 minutes from a property management standpoint can make or break having a good tenant. Tenant turnover is expensive, like Steph said. So minimizing that is key. Kind of going back to, well, we haven't even really covered questions, but one of the questions you can ask is, what does your history look like for evictions or tenant turnover? What is your average? How long do your tenants stay when you're managing those properties? That could give you an idea of kind of how their tenant screening is working for them.
One of the pieces too, when you talk about tenant screening, is when you're doing verification things, it's always good to go 2 or 3 deep. Their current landlord may verify that they pay rent and they live there and they pay on time, but they also may really want them out. So they might give their glowing reviews. The landlord prior to that could care less. So they're going to probably be more honest in that conversation as to how they were as tenants. So being able to check us several deep is really helpful. The other thing is having a good property manager who truly reviews that application. We've received fraudulent applications. They happen, and they're really good. So it's really important to be able to look through. We had one recently, and where they said that they currently lived, the reason for leaving was the owner was selling the unit, but it was an apartment complex. So you wouldn't sell just one unit in an apartment complex. That was actually the red flag. Their credit checked out, everything like overall, in the quick look at everything, looked like a great tenant. But once you started combing deeper in that and you knew that that community was an apartment complex, that was a huge red flag. It opened up a whole conversation to realize it was a fraudulent application. So being able to have people that have that detail to look at it, fraudulent tax returns are very common. They look really good, things make sense, and there's maybe one font that's different for where they might have mocked things up. So it's really important to have somebody who's detailed on that front end, because you can't prevent everything. There's people living in the home, things can happen. We talked about that with Beth a little bit earlier. And at the same time, doing your due diligence up front will hopefully prevent a lot of pain later.
Maintenance and repairs. Some tenants will call you for everything from a light bulb to a loose screw, and then others will let the toilet leak for 6 months. So it's always good to have to understand what is the process for the property managers to receive and deal with maintenance. Most property managers are going to have some sort of tenant portal. We find that having a simple text message conversation set up with our tenants on our office line seems to be the most preferred way for tenants to just openly text us and say, hey, a leak is happening. And then we actually go in and enter it into the maintenance portal for more of a tracking purposes. But the easier those tenants can report something, hopefully the more likely they will report it, and hopefully you can, mitigate any such like a 6-month leaking toilet. We laugh because we had a similar situation like that. But anyway, how do they track it? The big things for maintenance is, depending on the type of owner you are, you may already have established contractors, handyman, plumbers, etc. For you, you might be saying, hey, I want a property manager where I can utilize the people I already know. And vice versa, there's some people that are like, I don't know anyone. I want you to handle all maintenance. Knowing that up front will allow you to ask when you're interviewing these property managers, how do they handle maintenance? Are they open to using your contractors, or do they only utilize their internal maintenance team? And if they utilize their internal maintenance team, do they charge an overhead? Some property managers will charge essentially an overhead, a 10% overhead on all material. So that's something to be aware of. They may not be upfront with it, but it's just something that you need to go in and ask questions and try to understand how that works out for you. How is it documented? We prefer to be very open. So like if there is a maintenance issue, we would like to take a photo of that and send it to the tenant or to the tenants and the owners to show, hey, this is what's damaged, have it repaired, and then take another photo and show, hey, this is what it looks like now it's been repaired. That way you see the before, you see the after, you see all the cost involved. It's very black and white. There's no questions to be asked. So asking that of your property manager, how do they track that? What as an owner should I expect to see when there's a dishwasher going out? Is it just going to happen? Are they going to call me? Something that we see here is holding an additional $500. Something that we do is $500
The reserve.
Reserve. So like our property management, $500 or less, we will take care of it, but we also notify the owner. So figuring out, does that property manager do something similar? Do they just call you on every notice? I'm going to bring up just because I know Beth is leaving the States. If you are moving out of the US, or if you're going to move to a time zone that's not, where your property manager can reach you on a regular basis, you may also want to know, would they be willing to contact maybe someone here stateside? So if there was an emergency, such as, I don't know, the house caught fire or something that's just drastic, that they could contact maybe your family members or friends or something like that to handle maintenance in lieu of not being able to get a hold of you. Because we've also had issues with deployed service members on subs where they're deployed, they're on a submarine, there's very little communication, and in lieu of them, we reach out to their mom.
I think that's important to note. It's a little bit of a side note from here,
Yeah.
but even if you have a property manager or you self-manage, if you are deployed, designating a POA who can oversee if things are needed on the property is important. And then having a property manager helps drastically with legal and compliance. A lot of times I'll see people say, oh, I just went on NOLO and got a leasing form. If you go online and you get a lease from there, you're most likely missing the state and local disclosures, the laws that are required. In our state and our city alone, there are, they're called just cause eviction and rent cap limitations, and certain people are exempt from those. But if you don't provide notice and notify that you are exempt, you are held to those. So having the right forms in place, the right guidance in place will protect you from costs, from lawsuits. And then the other piece is, if needed, evictions. What are their connections or relationships to be able to help in terms of attorneys and legal issues of the sort. One piece that's not on there too is when you have a good property manager, sometimes there are additional taxes for out-of-state owners. So being able to understand the full financial picture, is there a local rent tax? Is there, a state income tax for out-of-state owners? Things like that. How does that impact your investment is also helpful.
So two things. One is if you guys want a list of questions to ask a property manager, we have a one-page list. Just shoot me an email at rentals@5peakspm.com and we'll shoot it over there or email you back the list of questions to ask. Some things we didn't talk about is when you're interviewing the property managers is the distinction between large property management companies and the smaller boutique property management companies. Kind of what the difference is they say that, one property manager should be able to successfully manage 50 to 100 units by themselves. So on the larger side, you're going to see that. You're going to see where they may have 500, 1,000 units or doors, and there might be five people. They're going to have a lot different systems. they're going to have more disconnected. You're likely not going to have that same interaction that you might have on the smaller boutique side, where it's going to be more hands-on. They're going to be more able to customize their services to your needs. So there's something to think about when you are talking. It's not necessarily one's better than the other. It's a different type of service, and you have to determine what are you looking for. With that being said, I think we could probably open it up to questions. I'm not quite sure how to do that.
We can take them. Let's see. We can take them. People can open their mics if they want and ask the question, or they can type it in the chat.
All right, I got chat up.
Good. Not getting any questions. You can raise your hand too if you want. There's like a little raise a hand at the bottom. Oh, here.
Looks like Kyle raised his hand.
It's not showing on my end.
Oh, I saw it was raised briefly. I'm not quite sure how to.
Kyle, can you unmute yourself with your three little? Maybe not. I have the option to mute everyone, but maybe they can't speak. Maybe it can only chat in the chat. Let's see. Amanda asked, in regards to background checks, is there a particular type of background check we should ensure they are using? State, federal level, etc.
Each state is going to be different. So I would talk to your local property manager, because there are fair housing laws that vary based on location, what's protected, what's not, what they can ask. So that's something that I would stick on a local level to check and see.
Okay. And Loretta asked, other than doing the checks, are there ways to deal with professional tenants?
Not quite sure I'm following that question.
Is professional tenants like subleasing, or what's a professional tenant? I'm not quite sure what that would mean.
A long-term tenant? Maybe you can clarify, Loretta. We'll go to Kyle's question and then clarify in the chat. Kyle says, has ADPI thought about making a list of approved PMs? I'm not sure. I know we're still working on approved agents, so that might be a next step where we go to. I know for us, we have found that reaching out to other property owners and first getting referrals from them has been a first step, and then going from there. Because usually if you have a like-minded property owner and they're having a good experience with a property manager, that's a good place to start. I don't know, do you have any recommendations for finding a good property manager?
I would say that is that someone talking? Maybe not.
No.
I would say that finding one would be kind of what you just said, Beth, would be asking around. That's a great first step. I mean, you can do a Google search. I would say that there are some great, you're going to find a lot of great highly ranked property managers. But property management isn't a business where, if they're especially a big company, they're probably not going to have great reviews. And that's not necessarily a reflection that they're a bad property management. It's just the business that they're in, which means, they may have evicted people or not accepted leases and that. So if you've ever read some reviews on property management companies, it's not normally written by the owners or landlords. It's been by prior tenants who've had issues. So I think it's probably better to go with kind of word of mouth, asking around, get a few names, and then kind of going through the interview process. we kind of covered it in the slides. I have more questions. If you search my name, even in ADPI, you'll see that I've answered property management questions in the past with asking questions. I can't say that enough, is to ask questions. And this kind of even goes back to when you're finding a real estate agent, right? You need to ask questions. You need to find out, do they work for you? Do their personality and communication style jive with who you are? Because we're humans. We don't always connect with one another. And sometimes they might be a great person, but you just may not have that connection. They may not be quite as detailed as you need, or they might be too detailed.
Loretta, I appreciate the question that you asked, and I appreciate the clarification on that. That actually is a conversation right now amongst the property management forums. So the only way to protect yourself against that fraud, I talked to our bank on the same thing, is to accept cash or check. And I will tell you, one of the challenges with tenants is the harder you make it to receive payments, the less likely they are to pay on time. So it's a fine balance of risk and return. But that is a new fraud issue that is going on. I'd say it's less likely than it is more likely to happen. But I have heard of it and seen it, and I did talk to the bank about that recently. So really, I think they can do that they can recall and claim fraud on ACH, on credit cards, and your only protection is check or cash.
Yeah. I don't know if everyone can see Loretta's question, or even if what she's referring to, but if you caught what Steph just said, there is a fraud going on. I wouldn't say it's on the rise, but it's definitely becoming more talked about, where there are some tenants that are claiming that their rent was fraudulent by their bank, and then their bank is coming back and withdrawing 90, 180 days of rent.
And you have no right to dispute that. It just, they take it out, and then it's an owner loss basically, and then you go through the eviction process.
Yeah, then it becomes a lawsuit.
Yeah. So Yulia, you mentioned what's a good place to have on an application. We use our state applications, so they're through our realtor association. They ask for their residence history, the prior to residence, the prior to employment. We ask for stable employment history, which we verify. We do ask the questions of if they've had any kind of wage garnishment, any criminal things that we should be aware of. It asks a lot of those standard questions on there. And at the same time, that's where those conversations, being able to call the employers, have the conversation, call their references, and verify the information is most important. So I'm trying to follow all the questions, or the ones that are on there for you, to make sure I address them.
So the 1 month plus security deposit versus first and last month. So that's going to be a little bit state dependent. Like here, we can only collect first month's rent, and then
1 month of security deposit.
And the security deposit, which can't exceed your monthly rent. So you can't, if rent's $3,000, you can't say security deposit's $5,000. It's then $3,000.
Then you asked them the question on tips that could help in case a tenant's not following the lease agreement. I would say definitely that's where that property management, then the communication comes into play. So if there's things that they're not following, which can happen, it's addressing those up front, having a very honest, direct conversation with them, documenting that conversation is important. And then if needed, attaching financial penalties to that. You're welcome. I hope we answered all those questions. I was trying to be detailed for you on that.
I think when we first became property, when we were hiring property managers, we were maybe a little bit hesitant to ask questions if we'd get an HOA fee or fine, and to push to get answers. And I think we've evolved a lot. So when we get a letter, we recently had a boat that kept being parked on the street, and then it was moved to the yard, and then finally, and we were pretty frank about it, being like, can you, and it also was a catalyst for, well, if they're not following the HOA rules, then what else is going on? And everything turned out to be fine, thankfully, but remember that the property manager does work for you, and if you can be, I always find that we're really kind and grateful when we are asking for requests, but not to be afraid to ask questions and ask if something has been done. And sometimes maybe it has been done, but you just have, maybe we've missed the email or we've missed a correspondence. But if you have a question, I think it's better to clear it up earlier than let things build up down the road.
I would say that's 100% right on, right? Because you don't want to sit on that and then something else happens and then you're like, like they never answered me about this and now it's this, and all of a sudden you start putting this picture in your mind where it's like, oh, this property man, I don't like this property. They're out to get me, and the tenant's running rapid. So it's much better to just be frank, have a conversation, right? Like you said, they are working for you. It's a working relationship. It's not always, flowers in the morning, but we're going to get through it. Realize that the property managers at the same time want your property to come back great looking, right? They have the same invested interest in making sure your property, it looks great, the tenant is paying on time, because it just becomes more of a headache, right? It becomes more time consuming. So if you see something, you hear something, it's always better to have that open dialogue and communicate than to hide it.
Something I learned with the HOA, and I think HOAs are a sticky point for a lot of people, but we've had times where the HOA has accused properties that we've managed, those tenants, as doing something because it's a tenant-occupied property when it actually wasn't our units. So we've learned now when the HOA calls about a complaint or a fine, we always ask for proof. So can they send us a picture? Can they send us, the proof on that? Because a tenant never likes to get accused of something either. So sometimes the HOA will say it's this and it's not. So again, ask questions, document, just make sure, because that's a touchy, HOAs can be touchy.
Yes, we've dealt with lots of HOA issues. Adam is asking, maybe you could read that. He said, may have missed it, but can you talk about setting tenant criteria for a property manager? If I have a specifics, how many are typically willing to actually follow my criteria for a tenant selection?
So I'll jump in and I'll let Steph clean up what I say. So most property managers, because it is a business, they're going to have their own set criteria. And they base that criteria is going to be based on kind of like their E&O insurance, what risk that company is willing to take on. So we'll kind of determine what kind of tenants and properties, for that matter, they're willing to manage and what kind of tenants they're willing to take on. As far as criteria, now we've had owners in the past say, not so much specified like, hey, I want a certain criteria, but they were like more so an E7 going, hey, my replacement's PCSing here. They would like to rent the same place. Or where the owner's kind of been like, we've actually had it where the owner said, hey, my friend wants to rent my house. And we tell them, well, they have to apply, they have to meet the criteria. Now, if they don't meet that criteria and you say, let's go ahead and still rent to them, we'll allow you to do that, but we may not want to manage it. Or if they don't decide to pay, then that's on you to handle that situation because they weren't meeting our criteria. So Adam, I'm not quite sure, kind of where your criteria would fall in line with like whatever property manager, if it's more specific, potentially they might be willing to do something like that. Then again, it might also start to violate fair housing laws. And that's another thing that we as property managers really have to watch out for, because there are, not professional tenants, but professional, I guess they might even be still called professional tenants, where they have lawyers who will go around and ask questions to property managers saying, hey, like, do you rent to Section 8? And here in California, all Section 8 are allowed to apply to any home. That's not something that you can prevent. It is allowable. Now, not all homes have been certified by Section 8 yet, the housing authority, but they can be. So all Section 8 applicants can apply to any home in San Diego. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or.
I'd say when you hire that property manager, you're putting trust into them. So that would be the most important part that I would say is in terms of, I would ask what their criteria is and if it aligns with what your goals are and what you are comfortable with. Again, we don't send our applications to the owners and say, hey, what do you think of these people? You know, our job is to be that person to find a good tenant for them, to vet that tenant, to go through that. And when we have a qualified applicant, we then let them know we have a qualified applicant we're ready to move forward with. So I would check on, see what their criteria is. If there's something in nuance and it doesn't violate a fair housing law, if they're open to that, have that conversation with them. But it's going to depend on the property management company.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Looks like, oh, it says Adam did say, I self-manage 18 tenants from out of state while active duty, and it's basically a full-time job, but I'm too much of a control freak to hand it over for that reason. I have a criteria and it clearly defined in my listing.
I think that's awesome. I've also learned as a business owner and somebody who's been running real estate brokerages and teams for many, many years, know your wheelhouse, know your strengths. And when you hire leverage, you can scale at a speed that you may not have been able to do otherwise. And you'd be surprised at the strengths and skills that you might be able to bring on in terms of talent. So I can understand. I am type A. I am a control freak, very similar. But at the same time, you know, learning that's a full-time job. And if you could put those talents elsewhere and leverage it with somebody that you truly trust, what doors can that open for you?
That's a really good point. Being able to grow, and someone, if you trust them, they can grow with you too. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, right. I guess we will. Oh, he said fair. So you see that. I guess we will wrap it up. We really appreciate your time this evening. That was super helpful. I took screenshots of your. Oh, wait, Loretta, one more thing. She said, I don't know how to word this question. Is there a max capacity of tenants, say if you have 2-bedroom home, that there are no more than 4 or 5 people living there, or does this cross over a line?
There are local restrictions in terms of how many occupants can be on a property, and we have to adhere to those restrictions.
And I'll just add one more thing is when this, you know, might be a question to the property manager when you're interviewing them. Do they make every applicant fill out an application? Something we do here, and I don't know if this is nationwide, but we make everyone over the age of 18 fill an application and apply. If they have a roommate come in and we find out that there's a roommate, they have to apply and
meet the criteria. Or they'd be in violation of the lease, because if you have the primary tenant vacate the property, you still have 1 or 2 tenants who are still responsible. So they're equally all responsible for the full rent and maintenance of that property. Yeah.
All right. I think we're good now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks. Everyone
have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.